Support for Swan Song is brought to you by viewers like you. Thank you. This episode's game is brought to you by a long-standing tentpole franchise of the mecha anime world. No, not that one, but the other one. That's right, this episode will be taking a look at Macross True Love Song, an interesting little turducken of a game that combines elements from the racing sim, visual novel, and turn-based mech combat genres. It was released on March 23, 2000, it was developed by Prime System Development, and published by Upstar. Prime System Development is a Tokyo-based software development company founded in 1991, which shut down sometime in 2007. Much of the company revolved around developing enterprise software solutions for big businesses. However, from 1997 to 2001, they briefly got involved in the gaming industry as a contract developer. While they were occasionally brought in to support on PlayStation games, the bulk of the work that they did entirely by themselves was on handheld systems such as the WonderSwan and the Game Boy, as well as multimedia CD tie-ins for various anime franchises. The publisher status of this game is a little bit odd, so let's quickly address it. The official WonderSwan website, as well as the product code for this game, says that this game was published by Layup, but the logo on the box art implies that it was published by a company known as Upstar. So which is it? Layup is a company that was founded in 1979 as a contract production and planning company for lines of toys and character goods. It's pretty rare for other companies like this that I've looked at as part of the series, but they are still around today. For a more recent example of the kind of work they do, Level 5 essentially handed off the Yokai Watch intellectual property to them, and it was their job to research and design what toys and games should be made around that universe. Layup merged with two game developers and publishers, Varie and Sonnet Computer Entertainment, in 1997, and formed a multimedia business division named Upstar, responsible for the design and publishing of handheld and console games. So despite the inconsistency in branding, both are technically correct. Layup published the game under their Upstar label. While they did not program the game themselves, Upstar definitely did have a hand in the planning and design document of this game before handing it off to the programmers at Prime System Development for it to be developed. Co-created by Studio Nue and Artland in 1982, Macross is a space opera media mix project built around a science fiction universe in which alien technology is reverse engineered by humanity to create mechs and faster-than-light space travel. Each Macross series focuses on a conflict waged in space with the help of giant transforming robots, but also the human aspect of interstellar warfare and the seeking of peace and unity through love and song. Unlike its contemporary, Gundam, which splits its numerous works across multiple timelines, essentially all of Macross consists of a single unified franchise chronology. At time of recording, there are 4 series within the greater franchise chronology: the Super Dimension Fortress Macross from 1982, Macross 7 from 1994, Macross Frontier from 2008, and Macross Delta from 2016. Assuming the current pace continues, you can generally expect new Macross series to show up every decade, and aside from the original Macross, they are all spaced out by about a decade from each other in the fiction as well. Macross is a huge deal and has contributed massively to anime and science fiction culture. Series creator Kawamori Shoji invented the idea of vehicles transforming into mecha fighter robots and would popularize the concept of Macross. Hasbro would license his line of Diaclone toys and provide the basis for what would eventually become Transformers, and he would actually later go on to make designs specifically for Transformers. Lin Min Mei from 1982's The Super Dimension Fortress Macross is also credited as being the first ever virtual idol, setting the groundwork for the Vocaloid boom and Hatsune Miku's popularity in the mid to late 2000s, as well as the proliferation of VTubers in the late 2010s. Also, Top Gun is just Macross for American sensibilities, don't at me. Macross does also have an unfortunate history in the West. In 1985, Harmony Gold USA combined work from Super Dimension Fortress Macross, Super Dimension Cavalry Southern Cross, and Genesis Climber Mospeada to create an 85-episode anime called Robotech for the North American market. Robotech is quite a polarizing series for understandable reasons. Aside from the usual complaints about any kind of adaptation for the Western market, the main complaint here is the amount of gymnastics Harmony Gold had to do to try and tie together 3 completely unrelated series into a coherent whole. At the same time, I don't want to downplay the important role that Robotech had in growing the fanbase for anime here in North America at the time. Even if it was far from perfect, it may have been the only anime you had access to at the time, so you sort of had to deal with the hand you were dealt. Unfortunately, Harmony Gold's meddling with Macross goes far beyond what they did as part of the Robotech adaptation, and the international distribution of Macross has been subject of legal turmoil for much of the franchise's history. At long last, in 2021, Big West, Studio Nue, and Harmony Gold appear to have come to some sort of resolution, and Macross properties are finally starting to officially see the light of day outside of Japan. If that sounds at all interesting to you, I highly recommend you go find a copy of Macross Do You Remember Love that fell off the back of a truck, because it's a 2-hour concentrate of everything that makes Macross great. Macross True Love Story takes place in 2043, a few years prior to the start of Macross 7. The story revolves around the crew of the Mega Road-class colony ship Odin 4, who tried to return to Earth by making use of the Spacefold system, only to face a system overload that would leave them off course 26 light-years away from Earth. The game follows the Odin 4's long and arduous journey back to Earth without being able to rely on the Fold system and the training and adventures of the player character and rookie Valkyrie pilot, Reggie Sterling. Macross True Love Story is an odd little hybrid experience. On the one hand, this is a racing simulator about being a Valkyrie pilot, training for various combat situations, and patrolling space for Zentradia attackers over the course of 6 in-game months. Each week, aside from your mandated patrol days and rest day, you'll be able to decide which activities you want to schedule on which day, influencing Reiji's character stats, such as their stamina or combat abilities in the Valkyrie's fighter, Gerwalk, and Battloid forms. Once you've set your schedule for the week, you play through each day's activities sequentially, and once the week is complete, you get to save your game and move on to the next week. One of those activities is going out on the town, and that's where you run into the second half of this game, a visual novel where you can pursue one of 3 different female heroines in romantic relationships. The first week of the game makes this abundantly clear by making you run into all of the heroines from the usual pool of anime archetypes, and making it clear that your character has the hots for all of them. As your character wins more battles in-game, they gain more notoriety as a pilot, and this can influence how the heroines perceive you as a potential romantic partner, and your success in that endeavor will ultimately influence which of the game's many endings you will experience. Patrol activities are code for battles you'll fight in space against various Zentradi forces using your Valkyrie fighter. Each of these fights has you go up against multiple Zentradi units, and you need to try and take them all out before a turn counter in the bottom right runs out. You can make use of various onboard weapons, evade, or transform into a different form of your ship. Your ship has a special weapon with limited ammo, which is indicated below your health bar in the battle menu, though it is awkwardly never indicated anywhere in the game's UI which of your weapons consumes that ammo. Combat is by far the lowest point of the game, as enemies have a ridiculously high chance of evading your attacks, and there's not much you can do to work around that. The evade action is actually kind of misleading. You have a chance of evading any incoming attack whether you use the action or not, but choosing evade boosts those odds in exchange for your turn action. If evasion still fails, you'll take reduced damage from incoming attacks, which I guess is better than nothing. The problem is that Zentradi units seem to have godlike evasion. I've never seen them take a turn off to evade, they just seem to have better chances of evading naturally than you do when you take your turn off and use the evasion action. It can sometimes take 3 to 4 turns just to land a single shot on an enemy ship, so knowing the damage potential of each weapon is critical to destroying all units within the turn limit. But especially if you're facing off against 3 or more units, you'll need to, air quotes, strategically randomly evade to reduce damage taken from incoming attacks so you don't die in a few hits. As you can no doubt tell from this gameplay footage, the presentation in Macross True Love Story is quite impressive. While there are not a ton of music tracks in the game, the music that is there is spectacular, as you would expect from anything having the name Macross stamped on it. Character sprites and backgrounds for the visual novel sections are lovingly detailed while remaining readable, which is a hard act to balance with such a limited monochrome palette to work with. The endings also go ham on some really nice illustrations that take over the screen aside from the dialogue box as well. The artist really killed it in this game. The combat sequences, however, are a bit rough. I think the unit sprites and the space backgrounds that are shown on the battle menu are pretty good. However, the battle animations are a whole other story. They are slow and drawn out and feel extremely repetitive and boring, although I will admit that this was kind of the trend at the time. It's not like the Super Robot Tyson games where yes, the battle animations are generally going to be long, but the quality of those animations will make up for it in impressiveness. It's not even that they're that badly executed, it's just that you spend so much time watching units slowly evade incoming attacks that it just makes the combat issues feel even worse than they probably are on paper. While researching this episode, I came across a lot of opinions from Western Macross fans in the mid-2000s, and surprisingly, not so much from Japanese fans back in the day. I don't think fans' hearts were open to raising sims and visual novels at the time, and I think Macross True Love Story got unfairly dismissed as a bad game because it wasn't the kind of game that Western fans wanted. And let's be fair, we all know it wasn't the kind of game lots of Western fans could fully enjoy because of the language barrier. It's easy to see someone facing a wall of text that they can't read and wishing it was just another strategy game or a side-scrolling shooter, because then at least they'd get to engage with it mechanically. While they're not exactly going for the same thing, I've played enough Sakura Taisen to know that there is a lot of promise in the formula that this game wanted to pursue, and I wish they could have pulled it off because maybe then it would be at the top of people's fan translation wish lists. One of the interesting tidbits about WonderSwan mecha games is that a decent portion of them were later ported or remade entirely on other platforms, with the WonderSwan version serving as a weird artifact of a first draft version or something that would eventually be revered by fans. Macross True Love Story is not one of those games, but I definitely think it should have been. I wish I could have lived in a timeline where this saw a GBA port with colorized sprites and backgrounds and illustrations, and where they threw out all the combat engine or redid it to be much more compelling. The Raising Sim and visual novel sections of this game are honestly really solid, and I would want to push forward to see more of this game if it wasn't for the awful combat. If you have a lot of patience for questionable turn-based combat and the ability to read Japanese, then Macross True Love Story isn't a bad way to kill 3 hours to see a single route through to the end. But this is a game with lots of replayability thanks to its multiple endings per heroine, and that's a much harder sell due to the combat being the way it is.